Okay, just FYI, I am heading out. I'm still in Altoona, but heading out for the morning. It is 8 degrees this morning, even inside the Jeep. So I decided to do my farewell from Altoona inside instead of being outside, and hopefully we have a nice quick trip today. It's 460 miles or thereabouts, and I look forward to touching base with you along the way. Well, today's video is going to be a little bit different, follow a slightly different pattern than our other ones. And that's largely because yesterday wasn't particularly exciting. It was exciting for me to come home, to be driving all along familiar roads. I mean, once I hit New Jersey, there wasn't a thing that I haven't driven on dozens and dozens of times throughout my life. So it was, exciting just to be coming home. But there were no states that I drove through yesterday, except for one very, very minor surprise. There were no states that I drove through yesterday that I didn't drive through on the way out of town. And everything was pretty uneventful. I mean, there were some nice mountain views in Pennsylvania that I did take footage of, but I don't think I'm going to include them here. And other than that, it just wasn't all that crazy or exciting. So I'm really just going to be celebrating being home and share with you a little bit of the overall adventure. So I'm going to start off with my song. My song for the day is New York Groove by Ace Frehley. I know we're far from New York here in Rhode Island. We much more associate with Boston, Boston teams, Boston culture, Boston life. We're really awfully close to Massachusetts, especially in this section of Rhode Island. But for someone who grew up in New England, but closer to the New York side of New England than the Boston side of New England, I still have an affinity and association with New York. So coming home, for days, I couldn't wait to listen to New York Groove by Ace Frehley. I encourage you all to, again, click on the link in the description and take a few minutes with Ace Frehley from 1978, New York Groove. Thought for the day. My thought for the day is really just the celebration of being home and how great it is to come home. You even get to hear the clock for all those of you that spent the first 6 months of COVID listening to that clock chime in the middle of worship. It's just, oh my gosh, what a blessing it is to be home. It's going to take a long time for me to unpack the whole trip. I'm not even sure there's a whole lot to unpack. Other than the fact it was an excellent adventure. It was probably everything that I hoped it would be. The wheeling was phenomenal. It was really good. It was fun. It was challenging. And obviously, as you watch, some of it was disappointing. But that any good adventure has disappointment and antagonists in it. It's not just joy, happy, everything's one wonderful thing after another. Otherwise, it's not an adventure. So just the opportunity to see so many people, to see so many states, to at least glimpse some of the different cultures, many of whom I clashed and struggled with, but just recognizing the diversity of what we are as the United States of America. It's heartbreaking on one hand, but is also 100% reality. So the wheeling was great. The travel was all that I expected it to be. At times as hard as I expected it to be. At times easier than I expected it to be. thrilled that I had no major incidents. I wholly went expecting at least a flat tire in the middle of a blizzard, if not more challenging things, and didn't have to face any of that. The one disappointment, the biggest disappointment that I have is the way that COVID impacted my trip. And this was my choice. There were certainly many people traveling and living in all the areas that I was who they were choosing not to let COVID impact their lives. Whether it did or not in the end, who knows? But I chose not to eat in any restaurants, not to visit any taverns or local pubs, which I had hoped to do prior to, the Omicron and COVID coming out. And I definitely would have loved to do it. Missing out on cultural sites, going into museums, going into, one, I didn't have a lot of time for that. But even if I did, I chose not to do them because they were indoors. And there were multiple times I was invited by people to go out to eat or to hang out or to go do something together, particularly in Utah. And I turned them down every single time. And that was disappointing because, particularly being by myself and just being so far from home, I wanted to meet people. I wanted to learn. I wanted to share this experience with others. Yet I knew that all of them, 100%, were not masking, would not mask if we went inside, and wouldn't respect what I consider to be common sense COVID protocols. So despite the fact I enjoyed their company out on the trails, I was not comfortable continuing relationships with them that would have meant being indoors, sharing meals, drinks, or just other common time together. So that was the biggest disappointment, was everything that I lost on this trip strictly due to COVID. But that's part of where we are. It's part of how we live. And I chose to take this sabbatical and to make this trip during this time. And as I said, on the day of disappointment, there were probably some blessings that came along with that as well. So I think I'm just going to share with you now just a slideshow of different images and experiences, some of the travel and such, just a bit of a slideshow of my experience and what it was like as kind of a farewell. Well, hard to believe, but I'm home. I'm home. So in conclusion, once again, thank you for joining me on this trip. Thank you to everyone who sent me a text or prayed for me or a message of some other sort or who just thought about me. It meant a lot. It definitely changed my trip putting these videos together. It took a lot of time, took a lot of effort. It also gave me something to do when I might have been bored. It had its pluses and minuses, but it was a blessing for me on some level knowing that I was sharing this experience with other people. Hopefully you appreciated it. If you didn't, I'm sure you're not still watching. So saying all that, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. It was definitely adventure, and one I will never forget.